And again, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. The argumentative essay question is the one that I know it had me freaked out, and I think it had lots of AP Gov teachers freaked out across the country. And I think a lot of that stress ended up being unwarranted because A, it's worth just 12.5% of the score equal to the other 3 FRQs, and B, kids actually didn't do all that badly on the argumentative essay. They don't have score distributions up, but I was at Steve Meinhold's breakdown of the AP exam at APAC, and he was very complimentary of teachers and the job that teachers across the country did in teaching the argumentative essay. So it did not go, or it wasn't nearly as bad as people thought. So as you can see, the argumentative essay last year was about federalism, and kids had to argue whether or not expanded national power was a good thing or a bad thing for policymaking. And they had to use at least one of these 3 documents, the Articles of Confederation, Brutus number 1, or Federalist number 10. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see what they have to do. They have to have a defensible claim or thesis. They have to support it with 2 pieces of evidence, one of which has to be from the foundational documents. The other piece can come from course concepts or another foundational document. They have to have reasoning, and then they have to do a refutation concession or rebuttal, an RCR. So some teaching tips. The claim or thesis has to be arguable. And one way to help kids do this is have them really write 2 elements. Take a position. The growth of national power benefits policymaking. That's their position. Great. Awesome. Then they have to add a because statement to establish a line of reasoning or an argument. The growth of national power is beneficial because, and we'll see here an example. I'll throw it out there. A couple of other things before the example, sorry. Encourage your kids to put it in the introduction. And in fact, I've taught my kids, you know what, you don't really even need an introduction. You need to have, just do a 1-sentence thesis statement as your introduction. I know that's not good writing style, but I'm trying to simplify a little bit for kids and again, make it easier for the readers in June to pick up on my kids' thesis statements. In my class, I am not awarding the point for the thesis unless it is in the introduction. I'm really trying to reinforce that, that it has to be in the introduction. And there were some groans and some complaints, but it is what it is. Here's the sample thesis statement. The growth of national power has benefited policymaking because it has helped ensure all citizens are treated equally regardless of where they live, right? So it's sort of a civil rights, civil liberties sort of argument, but they take a position and then they give us because or a line of reasoning as to why that position is the correct position, all right? The evidence. They should write 2 paragraphs, 1 for each piece of evidence. And I've taught my kids and I've used with my kids the kind of the classic claims evidence reasoning format that a lot of English teachers use, and I know some social studies teachers use this. And so in the first sentence, they just need to state their claim, okay? Just lay it out there. Answer the prompt, so to speak. Provide some evidence, and then explain how this evidence supports their claim or thesis. Now, my kids made the mistake on their some of my kids, I should say, made the mistake that they saw this model and they're like, okay, I need 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences. No, I told the kids, right, that don't think of sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3 as just sentences, and so I need to change this PowerPoint perhaps. I didn't use the PowerPoint with them, but this model should be, step 1, state the claim. Step 2, provide the evidence. Step 3, explain how this evidence supports their claim or thesis. Because I got some very mechanically grammatical or very interesting structured sentences. Reasoning can be anywhere in the response, but ideally they should include it here. If they follow this model, they'll include their reasoning in their evidence. And I tell my kids to do reasoning for both pieces of evidence. Just never hurts to have an extra piece of reasoning.
I am doing the same thing because that reasoning point is kind of hanging out there, and to be honest with you, I've never completely understood how it's scored or why it's just dangling as a single reasoning point, but I figured I could cover all my bases if they did it with each piece of evidence. Like somewhere in there, there has to be reasoning, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I encourage my kids to have reasoning with both pieces of evidence. Again, because I'm pushing this claims evidence reasoning sort of setup. And while we don't have examples of evidence and reasoning in here, again, from a space standpoint, there is now a sample argumentative essay posted, and I've got it up here on my phone, and they've got some pretty, they sort of follow this model. And so you can kind of see that this claims evidence reasoning in action. All right? Refutation, concession, and rebuttal. Okay? Again, sort of two things. They have to state, or I should say describe, an alternative perspective. Some may argue that policymaking is hurt by expanded national power. Then they have to tell why they're going to, or how this is wrong, refutation, how this may be right, concession, or they may have a point, but their point's not better than my point. And of the three, refutation is really sort of the simplest. And again, I picked that point up from Steve Meinhold, the chief reader at APAC. He just said, kids, why would kids write a whole essay and then tell us why they're wrong at the end? Why would they concede? Was basically one of the messages he sent, because I guess kids just did not handle concession very well.
I'm telling them not to use concession, honestly.
Yeah, I'm telling my kids really
just forget that.
Yeah, I'm telling my kids just to do refutation. And so, again, from the sample that's posted on the College Board website, the kid has a pretty clear refutation. Says, although some states' writers may claim that expanding the powers of the national government is harmful or could infringe on people's rights, as stated in Brutus number 1, this simply would not happen as often as some would claim. Within the federal government, there exist several forms of checks and balances and separation of powers. And he goes on, or she goes on. So they stated the alternative perspective, and then they laid out why that alternative perspective is not correct. They engaged in refutation. So a couple of tips here. Multiple opportunities to read, use, discuss the foundational documents. Come back to them again and again and again. I would argue, maybe I have a semester-long course. I have 18 weeks. There's 19 or 9 documents. I'm trying to do a document of the week, and that means every document gets 2 weeks. And you got to come back to that time and time again. Again, incorporate.
And also make sure kids can match the right document with the right argument. I'm having trouble with that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm having kids picking the wrong document to make their arguments, and so before they write their effort or their argumentation question, going through in class, what are all the ways you could use this?
Yeah, I had kids use Brutus number 1 to try and support elite democracy, which is not correct.